Hello again. You're watching the SMC Journal podcast. I'm Scott Moore, your host. This is the show where it's all about performance engineering in IT today. This is a second part episode of a two-part episode between, it's a conversation between me and Mark Tomlinson. We've been talking about load testing products that have had a merger or acquisition in the last 2 years. We are going to be talking about 4 in total. We've already talked about 2. Last episode we talked about Keysight Technologies and their acquisition of Eggplant, and the acquisition of Neotis by Tricentis. So check out that episode if you haven't looked at that one, and this will talk about the remaining 2. Before we do, let's talk about our wonderful sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Micro Focus, maker of LoadRunner solutions, LoadRunner Professional, Enterprise Cloud, and Developer. Performance matters to them. Did you know that LoadRunner Solutions have the largest community of practitioners? Well, join their community at community.microfocus.com and check out their performance engineering LoadRunner family page, as well as their complete playlist on YouTube that talks about performance engineering using the LoadRunner product. And also, don't forget to scan that QR code and go to the site directly. Makes it very easy. This podcast is also sponsored by Keysight Technologies, who we just mentioned. Eggplant Performance supports web, Citrix, and low-level TCP/IP protocols to meet your application performance testing needs, complete with real-time monitoring and integrated test results analysis. You can scan that QR code, check them out at the links that we have on our show notes. Finally, but certainly not least, have you ever wondered, why I'm so cool? Is it because of the coffee that I drank out of this cup every time you see me on this SMC Journal podcast? Well, it may be because I drink Haymaker coffee. Yes, that's right, Haymaker. I'm not saying that you're not as cool as me because you don't drink Haymaker coffee, but let's be honest, you could be cooler, right? So try Haymaker coffee. If you go to haymakercoffeeco.com and you use my code of PERF10, you can actually get 10% off of their coffee of any order that you purchase on their site. So yeah, be cool like me. So let's get right into the interview with Mark, and we'll finish it up with these remaining 2 companies, and I'll be back with you right after the video. Okay, I am here with Mr. Mark Tomlinson, back on the SMC Journal podcast. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
Good to be here with you, Scott.
I actually want to talk about load testing tools and the recent acquisitions. When I say recent, over the last, say, 24 months, there have been at least 4 what I would call major acquisitions of load testing tools. That brings me to the next one, which for me was the biggest surprise, was June 2021, where Grafana Labs purchases K6. Now, K6 hasn't been around that long. I know they used to be called Load Impact, I believe, and then they went to rename themselves to K6. But they weren't around very long as K6, and then Grafana Labs is picking them up. Before I say anything about that, what's your take on that? Because I know you're a longtime user of Grafana.
I am. I use it. I use the community editions in a lot of the same thing that now JMeter's backend listener talks to Influx or Elasticsearch or different, Cassandra, I think, is even will talk to any kind of time series database, and using Grafana together to do that. And you invest a lot of time getting a really nice looking dashboard. You don't want to. You want to use that to drive a conversation, and so Grafana is a lightweight, easy way to do that. I will say I still somewhere have a Load Impact hat from an STPCon. I think it was in San Diego, and it was really hot wearing a fedora with Load Impact on it before they became K6. But I'm a big fan of visualizing the solution. One of the best things we did in LoadRunner years ago was the online monitors during a load test and pulling it into the product. Right now there are people that I do load test I facilitate all the load testing initiatives. They never see JMeter. They never see a load generator or anything. All they see is the evidence of increasing load, real-time adjustments. Oh, go ahead and do a DR, put some chaos in here and there, boom, boom. And they could see it in real time on the graph. You can do that in an APM product. Sometimes, those APM products will be lagging. They don't refresh rate is like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. At least with the customization that you could do in Grafana and a good database, a really good time series storage engine, I use Influx, the community edition of that, really fast. And so you can be refreshing every second and get lots and lots of data aggregated pretty quickly. So I'm a fan of it. I can think that there's a little bit of a concern around all these other test tools outside of Load Impact that put stuff into Grafana. But since it's Grafana acquiring K6 and partnering in that way, I don't think they're going to shut off other Grafana install bases. I don't think that's going to happen. I
that was
see
my
more.
concern, right? That was my concern,
Yeah.
because I know of many different products who they're not necessarily satisfied with the test results, the way that they come out of the product, or they've built their own. And there's even, I was talking to a consultant the other day, he said, we have an enterprise that uses 3 different products. We don't want to show them 3 different analysis. We pull all of that stuff into a time series database, create our own. So that's all they see is the same graph, no matter what tool it is. And like you said, they never see the tool. But now when I heard that, I'm thinking, if I'm the other vendor, and I'm thinking, well, you're now in my space. We liked your graphs, but now you're in our space creating load too. Hold on a second. Why can we still get along? I mean, that doesn't bother you?
Yeah. Another hypothesis, again, not unfounded. I don't have any information about this. Just a thought. If I were in that product strategy session with Grafana, I'd be like, I see Influx with Telegraph, the tick stack, the chronograph, Telegraph, and the ability to do full-on monitoring. Like you could treat Influx as a full APM solution if you really wanted to get that crazy with it. But I could see Grafana saying, look, I'm going to use the power of the install base around performance. These are the people, the engineers, who sort of have a say or have some power in how do we make sense of performance in development, but more importantly, how do we graph or visualize performance going into production from a DevOps perspective. And they might be saying the performance tooling install base, the clout that they have, will help them to maybe do a couple other acquisitions. You see Splunk getting into observability. You see Dynatrace going hard into observability. Honeycomb's another company I'm tracking. Datadog, Catchpoint. There's some traditional APM folks. And then you have Influx data that's doing it differently. The Elasticsearch stats doing it differently. And maybe Grafana is going to start putting together a few things and using load testing and performance engineering clout in their install base to drive decisions in infrastructure, decisions in SRE. Hey, how do you guys make sense of performance when you're doing your testing? We should be making sense of performance the same way in production. And there could be an interesting chess game around that. But it's exciting nonetheless. Yeah.
The thing about Grafana is performance testers need graphs. We need graphs. No matter what tool we use, they need graphs. And you and me and James always say that the value in the load testing tool is in the analysis. The analysis key is the visualization, which Grafana provides. And it's not, so we use it a lot, but there's other people who need graphs as well. People who are monitoring thermostats for IoT and other uses that have nothing to do with load testing. They still need those graphs. I always thought of Grafana as like, Prometheus needs to be the standard for now for all metrics gathering. Grafana is now the standard for all graphing. And then, because everybody has that same problem that needs to be solved, everybody just standardizes on all this thing. So we go forward much quicker than, I got to use Windows Perfmon for this and RStat and Unix for that. And you just pull it all together with one thing. And the value is not in how you're gathering it, it's how you're visualizing it. But the visualization, that's Grafana's sweet spot. So
and I will give another shout out to the idea that continuous load testing and trending means you're not just looking at analysis and report for a single test, that big load test at the end of a process. One of the beauties with a lot of these visualization tools is having raw data and being able to control how it's aggregated over time on a trend throughout a sprint, throughout multiple iterations, and really driving decisions from longitudinal visualization. Wow, that's a mouthful. Okay. You know what I mean? Grafana excels at that. They do a marvelous job. I will say Dynatrace, from a time series database perspective, also does a very good job in that department. You could have your aggregation be very minimal over a long time and find some really interesting things in the data.
Okay, so our last contestant on the show. This one was also very interesting because it was through a series of acquisitions. This is September of last year, so this is the most recent one. Perforce bought BlazeMeter from from Broadcom, who had previously bought CA. So Broadcom is now spinning off BlazeMeter to Perforce. Perforce has a lot of different products out there, and BlazeMeter now is being added to this list. Did this strike you as interesting or strange or quirky, or like what's going on?
It doesn't surprise. Think of the equation when Tricentis acquired Flood, which I think of Flood originally was called Gridinit. And it was really started by like Evan and Tim and one other person I apologize for forgetting, but it was like 3 people. So the lure of a Flood.io or a BlazeMeter when Alon was on PerfBytes with us back in 2012, 2013. So one of the first, I think we did some BlazeMeter work together. I mean, there was really cool stuff, but the overhead was so small. So the margins looked fantastic from any money that they would make because there's no burden. You've got 3 or 4 people running this thing, and it was sort of a wave of a way of doing load testing in the cloud that was a challenge for on-premise people. Did load testing on-premise, like LoadRunner on-premise, and you had your on-premise tools, and then you had, hey, I'm going to do LoadRunner in the cloud. We did a beta on, there were so many headaches to try to take and morph that we've changed now in Micro Focus's LoadRunner in the cloud or Performance Center running cloud-based, SaaS-based. We've matured so much in 10 years in this that you could see a company acquiring Flood or acquiring BlazeMeter and saying, wow, the company-wise, the margins look fantastic here. We can charge that much for a reusable product, and really the elasticity in the cloud and everything is, we can scale the business without adding people. Awesome. It looks really good on paper. The hard part that you and I know, and I will say, Scott, you know more intimately than me, is selling load testing, selling the value propositions against risk, selling it against optimization. If you're scaling your business, you can drive the capabilities of your company by saying, look, we can do more transactions, we can do more, go sell more, we can scale more. There's different ways to sell performance, but for some reason, it's a really difficult conversation to have with people that have an MBA, unless they've been burned by some terrible outage. Performance is hard. Performance and load testing is hard to sell to a lot of the market that is absorbing dev tools. Oh, of course, we're going to build stuff. Everybody builds stuff. Let's have dev tools. Hey, we need QA tools, even functional testing tools. Well, we're going to build it. We got to test it. Because you've got these voices, these very, very strong voices in the industry that are about building software. Performance still kind of sits in between dev and ops. It sits more in ops, sits a little here. And the conversations become more complex, and that's harder to sell. And so I have total respect for every successful, and you're one of them, Scott, very successful performance salespeople. And I think that's what BlazeMeter and Perforce look at here. CA probably said, we love the product. It's kind of on its own island. Perforce is interested, and they have the ability, Perforce has the ability to sell complex technical testing, and CA, Broadcom, that's not their jam, maybe.
Yeah, they're busy creating the next chips for the next iPhone 5 years from now that we will not even see, and they're already probably playing with it. So
right. So I think it's a great move. If you can find a way to get really good technology, the BlazeMeter stack is very successful, and get it moved over into an organization that knows how to grow it, knows how to sell it, knows how to extend it and evangelize its capabilities and grow it, more power to them. I think Flood and Neotaload, Flood went through growing pains with Tricentis at a time when Tricentis didn't have performance. I think Flood was really the first tool that came along and said, hey, let's do something together. But now Tricentis is getting to be pretty smart. They're like, well, we're going to pull Neoload in. We know how to sell this, and they'll attract some people that know how to sell it. So I think that's a good move for Perforce there to pick that up and run with it. I will just say, from somebody who misses working with Steve Filoni almost every day to some extent. There were times when Steve and I locked ourselves in a basement somewhere in the Prune Ridge offices, which now the Apple headquarters, and tortured ourselves with like entire whiteboards of amazing ideas for what LoadRunner and PC could do. Those are some good times. I mean that sincerely. There was some really cool ideas that ended up on that whiteboard.
Wow, we should discuss that at a conference somewhere to the side and get snapshots.
Yeah.
Okay, but so one last thing I want to kind of end the conversation with is kind of like, okay, we've talked about these acquisitions and what we think they sort of mean, which we will just have to wait and see as time goes by, because everything's changed. There's always these moving cogs and moving wheels in IT. But I'm starting to see what I would call this segmentation. I've mentioned it a few times on the show, where we've got two different personas, I guess probably the wrong word, but people who do at the shift left side development SDETs, 50 user load tests to get the immediate feedback earlier in the CI pipeline. Traditional performance engineers and testers do an integrated test, system team of safe. We still got to get the big picture. We've still got both of these groups that are running. It's almost like I look at Flood, BlazeMeter, K6 to an extent as that former, and then I'm still seeing LoadRunner, NeoLoad, Eggplant. They're still over here, and it seems like that gap seems to be getting wider and wider, and it's almost like, okay, well, if you want to be with the cool kids, we got to come over here, but we still have all this stuff over here, and if we just focus on this, there are going to be things that slip through the cracks, and we will still have failures on Black Friday every single year because we're not paying attention to both of them, in my opinion, both sides. Your thoughts on that? Is it just am I just making this up crazy, or?
I think it's not specific to performance and load. It's more, what has the industry learned in shifting stuff left? And different companies move at different speeds, or they have different pain. I mean, even if you're doing something that's considered painful by some gurus in the contemporary practices of software development, but hey, I'm making a couple $100 million a year running it the old way. Who's to stop you? I mean, seriously. But there are risks that maybe certain companies haven't incurred, or they haven't, performance is just one of them. Security is the bigger one. Downside-wise, cost-wise, liability-wise. I think the idea that these companies, and I've experienced this firsthand, hey, we've done had a huge outage, huge impact to our customer base, to transactions, to revenue, and we went through all of the work, and then somebody starts asking the question, why didn't we catch this? That classic, why didn't we catch this before it went to production? And it instantly implies blame or shame, or you set that aside. It's like, let's figure out what we need to do upstream. And then you've got a company that starts to lead these practices to the left. And they should have always been there to begin with. I mean, if you move everything to the left gets so big, it gets back to being everything. And so I think there was some cost-cutting initiatives during different parts of the economy. Remember 2008, global financial crisis? We had people trimming down operations, trimming down the life cycle, and kicking stuff out. And then it was like, well, we really should get back to doing this and get back to doing that. We should get back to doing static analysis. We should get back to doing this certain kinds of instrumentation. We should be, now we have capacity. I think we're seeing performance shifting left, but it's really just making the left a bigger bubble that get back to the way we were doing it. So you could see it as a gap, but really, I think it's the left side of the circle is getting back to its full size. The lure of lightweight, no testing, move fast, break things in development, and make money. I think we've seen a lot of companies that vaporize when that, it seems too good to be true. Well, guess what? It wasn't true. There's a long-term install base. People reward, especially the market. If we think about publicly traded companies, there's massive rewards for people that invest in long-term view. And I think that's what we're seeing solutions-wise are following that trend. The NeoLoads, the LoadRunners, whatever, you can use LoadRunner in development. You could use LoadRunner in production. You could host it in the cloud if you could do lots of different stuff with a tool like NeoLoad or like LoadRunner. You could take little old JMeter, wrap whatever, like I do, wrap all kinds of stuff, use it wherever you need to use it. But at some point you start to bump up against limitations. And that's what I like seeing in these acquisitions is different influences, different, hey, we see a market opportunity here, or we see pressure, demand from our install base. Hey, they really would like solutions that do this a little easier or make this a little faster or a little more responsive to feedback. Great. We don't do that. Let's acquire a company that can help us do that. And I think that would happen. So I see what you see as a gap, but I really think it's just a bigger bubble to the left that ends up kind of edging over to the, we just start getting included. We're not going anywhere.
You've created a new term. You remember the man spreading? It's test spreading. Just spreads.
Test spreading.
Now it's the center.
Yes. Without the sort of negative embarrassment connotation. It's more like you should be proud of your test spreading. We've spread testing into SRE. We've even tested business ideas before the PMs say we need to build something wrong.
That's absolutely right. So very cool conversation. I hope that a lot of the companies are watching this, and I'll end it on this note. I have advised, and I can say this, I advised this internally when I was at Tricentis. I've advised it externally. I've been consulted by multiple test vendors over the last couple of years, and I always go back to quoting, of all people, Chris Lockhead, ex-CMO of Mercury, who's written several books since then, Niche Now, he's part of the big podcast. He's always saying this: don't fall for the comparison trap. The Coke versus Pepsi, McDonald's versus Burger King. We're better than them. We have the same thing as them, and we're cheaper. And that's a race to the bottom. And I have to tell these vendors the same thing every time. Don't go and compare yourself to a LoadRunner or whatever and saying, well, we do everything LoadRunner does, but we're just half the price. That's not the value. Listen to your customers and give them what they ask for, and you may end up building something that's totally opposite to what the biggest tool is today. You may be the biggest tool tomorrow before that because you did that. And it seems like, I mean, when I heard that from him, it's like a light bulb went off, and I'm trying to share that again. It's a tough nut to crack, but if you can ever get that information to them and they go, we listen to our customers, we provide what they want, that's our market, and that's how we make our money. Man, what a winning combination, because it frees your head of comparing yourself to that other, whoever that is, and you're free to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in these 4 examples of acquisitions, every single one of them are the cool performance technology is being acquired by somebody who can make it better. I don't see any one of these acquisitions like having a downside where it's like we got acquired by a company and now they're just going to let us dry, hang us out to dry or not invest or anything. Each one of these they're doing it for exciting, innovative reasons. And yeah, I agree. It's very cool.
Awesome conversation. Thank you again, Mark, for being on the SMC Journal today, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, Scott. It's great.
Wow, what a great conversation. As you can tell, we really enjoy talking about this stuff, and I have actually reached out to the 4 companies that we've talked about over these last 2 episodes. Hopefully we'll get them to respond. Maybe we'll get some people on the show and they'll talk about the actual, from their perspective, what the acquisition looks like from them, whether they're the acquirer or the acquiree. But if not, we'll continue talking about them, so that we'll just make them feel bad. No, no. So do you like this kind of content? Did you learn anything? I believe that if we kept talking, Mark and I could probably solve most of the problems in the universe, but we just don't have that kind of time. But if you do like this kind of content, consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. We would love to have you be notified whenever new episodes of the podcast come out every Tuesday and Thursday. And by the way, that's the same YouTube channel where the Performance Tour comes out once a month. And so sometimes there are some weeks where we have 3 brand new video releases, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then we just continue to put out content. And just this year, I'll be putting out, from this program, the SMC Journal, I'll be putting out about 100 episodes or more. So that is, and it's all dedicated to performance engineering of some kind. You're not going to get that probably anywhere else in that amount of content. So if you like that, let me know about it. You can reach me at scottmoore.consulting. You can reach me through LinkedIn or through Twitter. There's my information right there. You can also reach me by email at help@scottmoore.consulting. Would love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Scott Moore signing off for the SMC Journal podcast. Bye-bye.